to be, quote, better off than most states in the U.S., why do you think it is so important for Texas to become independent now, after being in the Union for 171 years? Senator Wilson, would you like to answer that?
That's a really good question. And the briefest answer is we're just running out of time because there's an increasing level of tyranny coming from Washington, D.C. and the global elites. And they have the means to make it impossible for us in the near future to have a session like this. Plus, they have thousands, maybe tens of thousands by now, of what says on the shoulder patches, Homeland Response Force, the Homeland Response Force. Young people in full uniform, armed, traveling around in armored vehicles on the interstates. I've seen them and talked with them at the truck stops and so on, who aren't reporting to military officers. They are just run by Homeland Security. So they can stamp out dissent very quickly. The other thing that's important is that the rest of the world and the other 49 states are looking to Texas to do something. And they realize to some extent that Texas is uniquely qualified to take the first step, the big step of regaining sovereignty as a nation state. And the reason is we won our independence from Mexico in a defensive battle in 1836. After that, we entered into treaties with Mexico and the United States as equal and sovereign and friendly nations, along with that treaties with many other nations and the Indian nations. We are a treaty-making nation, and those treaties, unless they have been by both sides ended, are still in force. So the window will close rapidly, and we have to move rapidly to get this to happen. Independence 5 years from now is not an option. As far as I can see, gaining independence 1 year from now is not an option. We have to move now.
Thank you, Senator. In your opinion, when people talk about Texas independence, are they really talking about their desire for personal liberty and freedom? Chaplain Capps, how would you answer that?
There is a definite relationship with someone wanting to live in liberty and freedom themselves and how that's played out in the rest of the culture. Individual liberty and freedom is what brought the settlers here in the first place. It's what brought the people to Texas. They were looking for land, opportunity, and freedom. There's no society that can call itself free if the individual is limited in their expression of their own rights. There has to be, and so for you to pursue your individual liberty, for you to pursue your individual freedom and expression of those God-given natural rights, that's the greatest thing you could do for all of Texas. There's no way to achieve freedom for liberty of a culture if the individual ones don't. Think about it this way. No group of people has a claim on a right. The individuals have the claim to the right. And so there is, when people talk about Texas becoming free and independent, yeah, they're pursuing their personal liberty and freedom. And that is how it should be. That's how we will attain it. You becoming free. That's my response to that question.
Right. Historically, the Republic of Texas was an independent, sovereign nation from 1836 to 1845. Who were the Texians? Secretary of State Ford, how would you answer that?
The Texians at that time were people that came here from other places in the country. They came from Tennessee and Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, but there were also a lot of people that were living here that were Mexicans. We were all Mexicans before we were anything else. Texas got to a place where they couldn't bear the regime anymore, and that's what led to Texas independence. But the people that came here were people that lived in other parts of the country, and they came here to live that life of freedom. It was a frontier place then, and they're pretty strong people, pretty strong-willed people, and they believed in having that place that they could call their own.
Thank you, Secretary of State Ford. How did the nation of the Republic of Texas become the state of Texas, and what role did international law play during this time? Chief Justice Cannon, do you have an answer?
The issue going back to that period of time, you have to understand what was considered the law of nations, which was as a regime that established principles that attached to what was then considered civilized countries. In that, under the proposition, as we understand, as that being the annexation and compatible with the law of nations, was that there was only two positions to acquire territory. One was either by treaty or one was by conquest. And when we look at that issue, and especially with these gentlemen right here and multiple others in our research, what we've gone back to find is that this resolution, as considered binding on both parties, even under the law of nations or the intent of that period of time, considered it to be a treaty. Now, I know there was multiple debates and arguments on both sides, but being that it was a domestic issue as far as the constitutionality of this issue, bringing Texas in as a state, that was the limitation on it as far as the understanding, because it was domestic as their rebuttal or argument to this annexation. But equally under that law of nations, and as today, which is the same definition, it was an agreement between two high contracting parties or two nation states. And that's what our research has shown us, is that that agreement, whether it's called a resolution, whether it's called a compact, whether someone would refer to it as a contract, those international relationships was, and it's very clear and defined, it became a treaty. And that's the position that brings it to being an international obligation, or a precipice or principle that we look at as binding on both the U.S. and Texas. And that's our position, to look at this as multiples to do today, because what some of the subjects that are brought up are those relationships with the Indian nations or with foreign powers. And within those foreign power relationships, it's understood that that treaty becomes binding. In other words, there's obligations on both parties. And our reference to this shows us that over a consorted time period, we see that those obligations have been abrogated. They've been neglected. And that's what our stand is to look back at that, related to today as far as Texas being independent. And the necessity is that someone, and that's what the Republic of Texas has done, is step forward to let the people of Texas understand there is a treaty and it's binding and the obligations have failed, and we are in that position to bring this to the people of Texas, to let them understand that that is what we are working for.
Thank you, Chief Justice. In what ways does how the Republic of Texas become the state of Texas affect the quest for independence today? Secretary of State Ford, would you be willing to answer that question?
As a state, there are, like Mr. Cannon said, Chief Justice Cannon said, there are certain obligations in the treaty, and those obligations are on both sides. They're not one-sided. They're not unilateral. So those obligations apply to both parties. As a state, Texas, as the Republic of Texas, the United States took the Republic of Texas in as a nation. They didn't take it in as a state. It wasn't part of their original boundary. and they said they'd take us in and we'd be equal to all these other things, but Texas was never a state. It was a nation in the beginning. And that's one of the things that we have to understand, that because of that one single fact, and the fact that we had treaties that we treated with other nations. There's one with France and Spain and Mexico, the Netherlands, England, and the United States, two with the United States. Those treaties are binding, like Mr. Cannon said, as high contracting parties can bind those nation states, and we're obligated to live up to those obligations. Ohio and Louisiana, Indiana, none of the other states are under those. They're not under that treaty, that cover of treaty, like Texas. So there's a big difference in what Texas can do and what other states can do. I think part of the movement we see is there's a huge dissatisfaction among the people of not just Texas, but our whole country, this whole country, with the way things are going. And there have been petitions passed around to secede from the Union. There is a way to do that, and that's really the only way a state can do that, is to come out and be part of, not be part of that union anymore. But Texas is very, very unique in that we have treaties, and those treaties prove that Texas is a nation. The rest of the world knows Texas is a nation and always has been. They tell you all the time, but you just don't know it. Texas's flag flies at the same height as the United States flag. And the reason for that is because Texas was a nation and is still a nation. Just because we're held in the position we're held under this treaty doesn't mean that we're not a nation still. So in order to gain that independence that we're looking for, it's different for treaties or nations under treaties than it is for states that are under the obligation of a Constitution of the United States. Did that answer your question, Mrs. Capps?
Thank you very much, Secretary of State Ford. Are there any differences in the process and/or outcome between the state of Texas seeking independence and the Republic of Texas seeking independence? President Jarnacki?
Well, what that is involved with as a nation that the Republic of Texas is, we must go through international law in order to get our independence returned to us, such as the Baltic states did from the USSR, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. They want the international route to regain the independence that they had from the USSR. We must therefore do the same basic route that they went. If the state of Texas was to request or go for independence from the United States, I feel that they would have to probably go the secession route. They do not have the standing as a state that we, a nation, have in the international venue. So that would be the difference. And that's probably as good as I can explain it in a short period of time.
Thank you, President Jarnacki. Senator Bob Wilson, would you like to add to that?
Just a little addition there, and that is simply that the state of Texas is simply a subsidiary of the U.S. federal government, and so it has to ask for anything, and the parent organization, the U.S. government, doesn't have to grant it, doesn't even have to give them a hearing. And so they can't appeal to international law because they were never a nation. We were a nation in every sense of the word. And so we will get this done through international tribunals.
Thank you, Senator Wilson. Secretary of State Billy Ford.
Yes, one of the other things that the state of Texas lacks is they lack territorial integrity. And that's one of the main things that sets Texas, the Republic of Texas, or Texas, apart from the state of Texas. We have territorial integrity, and that's one of those treaties that we have that's with the United States. It's a boundary treaty between Texas and the United States, and that treaty. They took away parts of 5 states to make 5 other states from that treaty. It's part of the 1850 Compromise. We won't go into that now, but that's the main difference between the state of Texas and the Republic of Texas, or Texas by itself, just called Texas. The state of Texas does not have territorial integrity, and then they also don't have the people. And all of our land patents and titles are in Austin, Texas. All the other patents for all the other states, Louisiana and Ohio, all of those land patents and titles are in Quantico, Virginia. Our Constitution said, and that's one of the things that when we were annexed, that they had to take our Constitution, that the lands of Texas would forever belong to the Texian people. So that's the other thing that makes us very unique, is we have that territorial integrity. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Secretary of State Ford. Who are the people of Texas today? To use the historically accurate term, who are Texians? Chief Justice Cannon, do you have an answer?
On the issue, especially with the research and dealing with, as we speak of today, under international understanding, because whether we grasp the concept or not, since the establishment of the League of Nations and that of the UN and the parameters that deal with it under international tribunals, what we look at is those definitions that are acceptable, rather than being because we could, and what may need to be done in certain areas and arenas is a linguistic expert maybe need to be called in, because 2 different peoples may look at a subject and pronounce it a different way without a concise or conclusionary position on exactly what the interpretation being. When you look at the issue of peoples, because in that preparation, as going back to the prominent jurists and publishers today, and even those present cases as far as the ICJ and other positions, peoples have a very difficult to delineate to such an extent that it identifies one group from another group. Now, I know there are indigenous peoples, and I know that there are minorities, and I know all these other positions that are accessible within the international community today. But to describe people, you're going to have to look at it and understand that, first of all, who determines who the people are? And we look at even the declarations of independence, and those are the founding of the 13 colonies in the Americas and other places. It says, we the people. And that's the whole position in the Republic of Texas, and seeking in this forum is to expound on all those that are out there today within Texas. As is spoken of, is in that territorial integrity, or those territorial boundaries. We have multiple different cultures, we have multiple different ethnicities, we have multiple different religious beliefs, we have multiple different this and that. That in the exactness does not identify a people in international. And the reason being is that we the people of Texas, now we can say that we have, or like-minded, but the main focus of it derives from the fact that you in Texas, living here, love your country. And some still don't understand, without the confusion, believe it to be a state, small s. But when you love your country and you have allegiance, you look at it as that which is extended. You have a great interest in that future. Because as was mentioned earlier, we can look at those positions as far as Estonia. And you look at Estonia, Estonia was held, and there was a transference of population from Russia and what we would consider the native people of Estonia. What we look at in Texas is because it's diverse, and the bottom line interpretation of peoples is all the people of Texas. And it's up to this or those that are there who have stood forward or in those proclamations understand we don't deny the people. Because that choice is going to be there, and it's going to be available to either stay because your loyalty is here and you love this country and you expect a much brighter future. So that interest in Texas will define you also with what is necessary so that we, through the negotiations, can understand that there is a mixed population, whether some will remain U.S. citizens, some will remain Mexican citizens, or some will remain French, and such and so forth. Those relations will be worked out. But identifying Texas today is up to each one of you to come forward, to make that stand as the original that brought about a difference for independence, not only of the Americas, but multiple other places around the world, as equivalent to that of 1836 in the Republic of Texas.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Senator Wilson.
Just a historical fact that clarifies a little bit. In researching back to the original documents, whether they were newspapers or books or journals, even diaries, in the 1830s and 40s, when they wrote about their countrymen, they called them Texians with an I between the X and the A. And so just to be true to that history, we're using that same term.
Thank you, Senator. President Jarnacki, do you have something to add?
Yes, as well as everything that has been mentioned as far as identifying ourselves as Texians, I believe that it is also a gut feeling for each individual that can't really be put into words. You go anywhere else in the world and they have heard of Texas. But you go somewhere else in the world and you ask, well, have you ever heard of Rhode Island or Ohio or Arizona? Probably not. Everyone knows of Texas throughout the world. And this gut feeling that each of us have determines us to be Texians, as well as everything else that's been mentioned.
Thank you, President Jarnacki. Okay, gentlemen, let me ask plainly, how can the people of Texas gain the independence of Texas? Chaplain Capps, would you like to answer that?
That's the question. They can and they will if they decide to. That's part of who a Texian is. They want to live in freedom. Part of what attracted me to the Republic of Texas as an entity, as a body politic, was the fact that they actually had some way that this could be done. When someone thinks about their natural God-given rights, ability to express them, whether it's their right to worship God as the God Almighty, as who, in such fashion as He directs me personally, and not just be able to hold that faith, but to express that faith. The ability to make decisions that I have to live with the consequences for. Make my own decisions that someone doesn't need someone else's permission to function. And so my wife and I set out and say, okay, we want to live free. We want to live in liberty. And that's not ideas that are in the public thought, primarily. We think they are, but they're not. But you think deep about them, you start realizing where it's all cut off. we had seen and visited with folks from various different persuasions of how it could be done. I guess it was almost 2 years ago. We went to an event and we heard folks mentioning ideas of, with us being the Republic of Texas, being an actual nation, that the venue of contest is the international community. Well, that's true. Thankfully, my wife has some education in the area, and she was like, that would work. That would do that. And so that's what, not sure what everyone else would be looking for, but that's the reason we threw our hat in the ring, is to say, look, there's got to be some way to do this, and there is. Now, is it easy? No, and these gentlemen know far more than I do about it. Is it easy? No. But if it was easy, God wouldn't need Texas to do it.
Thank you, Chaplain. Senator Wilson, do you have something to add?
Yes, it occurred to me as you read the question that one thing that the people who live in Texas can do is answer when the pollsters start asking, what would you agree or want for Texas? Now, Reuters, within the last year, took a poll of people in Texas, and it showed that of the people polled in Texas in a typical, thorough polling way, 36.1%, that's over 1/3, of people in Texas would prefer to be separate from the United States and its government and operate as an independent country. That was up from 25% a year earlier. So looking into the future then, if you know people living in Texas, encourage them to give their opinion in such a poll so that we can get a real measurement on it, because that will affect the outcome. What do the people of Texas want? And whether there's ever a referendum or a plebiscite held, there will be polls. I yield.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary of State Ford.
I'd like to point out that we have, by the very fact that we are a nation, that we have a distinct culture, we're a peculiar people here, that we have a right by international law that's called self-determination. You ask about how we could get our liberty. It's this simple. You have to stand up and want it yourself. I can't make you be free. There was a fellow that wrote about freedom and oppression back in the 15th century, a Frenchman by the name of Beauteuil, and he talked about how people get accustomed to being oppressed, and then oppression becomes the norm. Texians want to be free and out from under the entangling encumbrances of the United States, because quite frankly, I think I can do a better job with my business than they can. Does anybody here like to be told what to do? I doubt that seriously. Within reason, you do have a boss, and you got to listen to what your boss says. But if you don't want to listen to the boss, you don't have to. You can quit your job and go find another job, and then you can be your own businessman, and everybody becomes your boss. But the thing about Texas is, we have the unique treasure on our side, and the international law says that you have a right to self-determine. And what that means is we can abolish or alter our form of government any way we want to. And we can go back to what we were doing before. What most people don't realize is that when we get to that place, when you stand up and say, this is what we want, this is what I want, this is what we're striving for, and we want to be Texians and we want to be independent, the whole world has to listen to you. And whether our big brother to the north likes it or not, they're not going to like it. But there's not a whole lot they can say. There's another way of getting independence. We don't want to go that way. We already did that with Mexico, and we don't want to go that way. There's a better way. And that way is the way we're going. Why not use the tools that are set before us to accomplish those ends so we can get our liberty? There's a lot of things that we can do. And we got, believe it or not, you got the world on your side. It's Texians. All you have to do is step forward, come forward. This little panel up here and a few others that have studied over the last 3.5 years. And believe me, we don't have all the answers, but I've got enough answers to know that I can do what needs to be done. I yield.
Thank you, Secretary of State Ford. Chief Justice Cannon, would you like to add anything?
What I'd like to add is under this principle we speak of self-determination, the understanding of self-determination and its interpretation goes back to that American Revolution and also the French Revolution. It's a principle that establishes that when the people decide to determine their future, socially, economically, and politically, then that right implies. Now, once you get into a more in-depth study of it, you understand that there's two principles. One's internal self-determination, which is an issue that is basically that which is applied to subgroups that, because of that territorial integrity, does not break a state or nation state up into different areas. With the Republic of Texas, we hear, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing the voice of the people that we associate with, and it's not just subgroups. We're bringing the voice of the people to your attention to understand that you're not alone. In understanding those principles of self-determination is very clear, as in our research and study shows us that when you are oppressed or there is a domination upon these people, then the right exists. And when we look at these issues and whether it's comprehended in such a manner to understand that these situations that most people are unfavorable with, whether it's on the regular news channel, whether it's in association with other groups, or whether it's just a common man out there in the field plowing, he's disgruntled, he's upset, he doesn't see a future. He has become an issue, as was defined even in the early founding of the Americas. The Constitutional Convention dealt with the subject of the minority states and how was it that they would not be overlooked or dominated by the larger states, and they deal with that as far as the minority or the smaller states. All we're looking at as Texas is understanding that we have a principal right to determine. And that's the will of the people. And that's the reason we bring our voice to the people, because we want to hear back from you rather than a vocal or local. And also, again, mentioned, we don't want to go into the revolution issue. This is a 21st century, people. And being that it is in the 21st century and these events and these transactions have taken place over the last century, we believe in diplomacy. And we believe it can be accomplished through diplomacy and diplomatic manners. And that's all we're applying. But you, the people, have to influence us to help us as guardians for the people of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. We do have a question that came in. I'm going to put it out to the panel. All or most people in Texas have Social Security numbers. Does this mean they cannot be Texians? Do they have to give up their Social Security? President Jarnake, do you have an answer to that question?
Yes, I do. Social Security, as well as veterans benefits or anything else, is a contract between the individual and the United States government. There are lots of people throughout the world that have left the United States, residents of other countries, that still get their Social Security checks. They still get their veterans benefits checks, whatever it may be, or disability. It still comes to them. Once independence is granted, there may be a period of time where they may be suspended for a short period of time, but through the negotiations which will take place at the after independence is granted, that will be made very sure that people that receive those from the United States, which they paid into, will come back to them.
Thank you, President Jarnanke. Secretary of State Billy Ford, do you have something to add?
I do, and I agree with President Jarnanke. That is a contract. It has been a contract ever since you went to work. You signed a piece of paper, and they said, the government said, we're going to take this money from you, and we're going to supply it to you in your later years so that you don't go broke. You don't have enough intelligence to invest in the market to have a retirement, so we're going to do that for you. That's a contract. And as far as I'm concerned, they're bound by that contract. Now, here's the problem. If you think that Social Security is solvent, somebody's mixed your Kool-Aid up, because I don't think it is. I think that all the money that they've been taking in, they've spent everything they could get their hands on, and they gave that fund an IOU. Our economy, not just in our economy here in America, in Texas, in America, but the economy of the world is in grave danger. The only one I know of that's even anywhere close to being solvent again and on sound footing is Iceland. But most of us have never heard about Iceland because they arrested all the bankers and the Federal Reserve officers there, put them in prison, and they did away with their debt. They forgave all the debt and started over again. I think, it's just my opinion, and I'm just one person, I never really expected to draw Social Security. I figured it'd be broken by the time I got there. But I'm old enough to get it, and I do get it. And as long as they're paying it out, I want my fair share of it. But here's the thing. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the world economy will collapse much quicker. And then what are you going to do about Social Security then? As a Texian, what are you going to do? What are we as people living on this land, what are we going to do? You're going to have to figure out something. And you might as well make it with Texas as to make it with the one that lied to you and spent all your money and gave you nothing in return. I yield.
Thank you to Secretary of State Ford. Chief Justice Ray Cannon, do you have something to add?
Yes. One position I've seen, especially in study and research, it shows that because of this issue today of the international law and those obligations that we speak of, I believe it was France that had a colony in Africa, and the people of Africa, prior to their independence, were party to, operated as with underneath that French colonial authority. In other words, they had a contract, as we speak of as with Social Security or as with retirement or Veterans Association and such. That contract had to be honored because once the independence came, France itself refuted to follow through. So that allowed these individuals to move forward into an international tribunal to get remedy on the situation, which was endowed upon them to show that France was obligated, and the court or that tribunal ruled in the favor of these newly independent people. Yes. That the obligation still existed and the obligation had to be fulfilled. And that's the reason I say, and I think most of us agree to, is we look at this issue of the international today rather than going back a century back and living under a system that maybe is more prejudiced and more discriminatory, more empowering as far as who those superpowers are to delineate from those obligations and allow themselves to do as they will. That's sort of, that diplomacy is very key on this position, but education is very key because we need to understand that whether we grasp the thought of it or not, everything today is under an international agreement. These things right here took an international agreement. The cell phone you have in your pocket took an international agreement. The fruit that you get from your stores, even down to the insurance or the or even getting on a plane from an international airport from here to there. Everything today is tied under that global situation that we have to understand and comprehend and grasp and put our mind around it. It's not good old hometown anymore. You're living in the 21st century, and these things have adapted to where every aspect, whether it's even this microphone or anything else, we see it's made in China, we see it's made in Indochina, we see it's made in Mexico, we see it's made here, it's made there. That took an international agreement. And through these studies, we're understanding better and as we and have come to an agreement, is understand that international regime is our position. And as far as these, as we speak of existing contracts, they must be honored.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Senator Wilson.
Just to add a little math here, since that's my background, the question as it was asked reflects a fear that people have of losing something that they have. But they forget to calculate what they're going to gain when Texas becomes independent, because they are taxed and surcharged and stolen from in so many ways that they haven't heard of, or even if they have, they haven't put it on their calculator. They'll be so much better off financially than they ever will or could have been under the U.S. for all the reasons that people are angry about. Those won't exist in the Republic of Texas as a nation. The government of the Texas Republic can be operated on just import-export duties and nothing else, period. So then sit down and do the math. I mean, yeah, I get Social Security, but you know what? They take my Medicare premium out of it. And they tax me on my Social Security with income tax. They're not giving you that much, folks. It's all smoke and mirrors is all they're giving you. I wouldn't be surprised if it was at least a 50% gain for everybody listening to this forum today. 50% gain in their family financial position to be within the Texas Republic instead of within the United States.
Thank you, Senator. We are about to take a 15-minute break. When we return, we will continue the interview with our panel about Texas independence. I know that you may have questions and concerns about the implications of seeking independence of Texas. If you have a question, please write them down on an index card here at this table, and to the best of my ability, I will try to work them in. I would like to add that if your question is not asked of the panel today, that it will be looked at during future forums. Thank you, and we will now break for 15 minutes.
You are smiling, aren't you?
Thought it was.
these are cardioid mics, and so they don't pick up from here, they pick up from here.
We just started, by the way, so that's not.
All right, welcome back. We'll get back to speaking about Texas independence. Texas independence gives rise to many concerns that we want to explore now. I have a question actually from the audience. Gentlemen, please discuss the timeline and steps for independence. Senator Wilson, would you like to begin on that?
Yes, in fact, at the break I was asked by someone, do you really think you can do this in a year? And my answer, my well-reasoned and considered answer was, we need to get it done in a year because things can happen too fast. The rate of change in the world has ramped up hyperbolically. And those changes can make it impossible, eventually, for us to do what we're doing today. So yes, we can and we must get it done soon. Now, not all done, because there may be 3, even 5 years of arbitration and negotiation on the details of independence. Like who owes what to whom? Do we owe any of the national debt? Et cetera, et cetera. There's very great negotiations required. How many years before non-Texians can vote in our elections? And the list goes on forever. Those will all be negotiated. But the point is, when we're in negotiations, we're in the game. We're at the table. We are sovereignly declaring what our nation needs in order to exist. That's sovereignty, folks, right there.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary of State Billy Ford.
I'd like to, I don't know what our timeline ultimately will be, but it didn't start today. For those of you that don't know, back in 1995, there was a group of Texians that met at Bulverde to get this ball rolling and to get things started toward Texas independence. And in 2005, we had enough Texian people together that we said, okay, we're going to do something, even if it's wrong, but this is what we want you to do. We want you to put people in office and get the ball rolling. We've got to start somewhere, so this is what it is. One of the things that the international community looks at is continuity or continuancy from a certain period of time. We don't just wake up one morning and say we want to be independent. We didn't do that. But it did start in 1995, and there's a few people that are still with us that have lived long enough to see it come to this place. I didn't get started until 1999. But in 2005, we elected positions for those that walked out in abeyance and left the Texas Republic. And we filled those offices, and we put them back to fill out their terms, and we started the next Congress. And what you see here, these men that are here, some of them, well, all of them, these are not the only ones, but those men were elected by the people in an election to fill these positions. So we have been working that road all along. We have a people, we have the land, we have our currency, and now we want international recognition for the things we've done. And that's where Texas independence is. It may take us another year to get where we want to be, but we can't be denied that liberty that we're looking for. And I yield.
Thank you, Secretary of State Ford. Chief Justice Cannon.
When we look at the issue as far as a timeline, we can look at multiple examples that have been shown, especially in the last century, But one of the ones that mostly impressed me is because when we deal with this issue of the Baltic states and then understanding of their annexation into the Russian Federation, it was over a period of time of over 50 years where it finally became to where the Estonian people, in order to make a quick change of events, they all assembled, the majority of them, over 100,000 of them at a time, within the public arena, and basically started singing nationalist songs of Estonia, which were outlawed by the Russian occupation. So if the people of Texas, it is up to them as far as the pace that we can move forward. It's takes multiple issues that we deal with, especially financial, not only financial, but physical and mental. And all those things apply together. We are stretched very thin with but we have accomplished a great deal. And that's the reason it still falls upon the people. So if the people of Texas want to play outlawed tunes on outlawed pipes, then give us a call.
Thank you, Chief Justice. There have been some concerns that have been raised about the Texas independence. One of them is about public policy. What is the constitutional basis for the Republic of Texas, and what does it mean what it says? Will my natural God-given rights be respected? Secretary of State Billy Ford, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, our rights will be respected. We have the freedom to worship God to the dictates of our own heart here. Nobody compels you to do anything. You have a freedom to go out and learn a trade, and you have the freedom to keep your money. You have the freedom to do with your funds what you want to do. I made the remark a while ago, if I could have been able to do it when I was a young man, and they would have allowed me to opt out of all the taxing programs that we're forced to live under, I would have said, let me opt out, and I will never ask you for a penny. I will never ask you for any help. I will make it on my own. Now, for somebody young, that's a tremendous gem in your life, because then you have control of everything that you're doing from the time you start that until the time you die. The problem is when you're penalized for being an entrepreneur, or you're penalized for taking risk in the form of taxes, it kind of destroys the initiative to want to go out and do something. And yet we have a lot of people that are on subsidies that have no business getting those subsidies. I'm not going to call names, but I knew a veterinarian one time that he and his wife liked to pheasant hunt, and they went to Kansas and bought a farm in Kansas, never expecting to farm. All they wanted to do is pheasant hunt. They got into a program that said, if you won't grow a certain amount of grain, we'll pay you X amount of dollars. And so they said, well, that's okay, we'll just take that program. It not only paid for all of their pheasant trips, it paid for their land. Now that was your tax money that did that. Why don't they help some carpenter out there that's trying to get ahead? He's taking all the chances, buying boards and nails and all the equipment it takes to go work on a house. He's penalized because he has to give 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% of his money to a government that helps a veterinarian and his wife go pheasant hunting and pay for their farm while they're at it. So about our liberties, will those liberties be respected? They certainly will be, but with liberty comes a great deal of responsibility. So you're going to be held responsible for the things you do. If you mess up, a jury of your peers will be those people that you're dealing with. You're not going to be dealing with a bunch of black-robed people that are working for the corporation. I yield.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Senator Wilson.
Yeah, there's a principle involved in answer to that question, and that is the government of the Texas Republic will be according to the Texas Constitution, written in 1836, amended in the year 2007. And basically that Constitution means this: your Congress can make rules for how the government will operate in order to serve the people. But it cannot make rules that limit the people. I love to say that. Rules done by a government of a republic are to either say, here's how we want to function as a government, within the government, or here's how you provide service to the people. But other than the Ten Commandment type of laws, which are immutable and eternal, we don't make laws that limit the people. Not in this republic. Never.
Thank you, Senator. We do have a question that came in. Why does the Republic of Texas need recognition from anyone to become a nation? Chief Justice Cannon, would you like to answer that?
One of the fundamental principles in international law as far as that identity, when we speak of the identity of the Republic of Texas, you're speaking of it as a nation. And in that recognition, it also confirms within the relations, because again, when we look to this time that we live in, those assembled today within even the UN, there's close to 200 countries. And because of that charter that's within that, and they're bound to, there are multiple issues that deal with basically independence of new countries, because we see the effects that have taken place not only in the Middle East, but in the African continent. We also see those issues that have transpired in Latin America. In that position, as being in the 21st century today, because that's what we're looking at, we have to understand that everything that we deal with is an international issue that deals with outside the borders of Texas. And because of that transition that has escaped us, because most of the multitude of us have not been up to date on those positions. It says in the requirements of dealing with obligations, as we spoke of earlier, those obligations may be incurred, but does the Republic of Texas wish to pursue? So if you, as the majority of people, love your cell phones, love your automobiles, love the electronics, love the technology, love bananas in the wintertime, because when I was growing up, everything was seasonal. In other words, if you wanted oranges, you waited till December, and apples and such and so forth. But we've become accustomed to that situation where in that recognition, there's an obligation that's bound because of that under that organization that we know of as the UN. It's a fact. So we have to look at it and deal with it as a fact. It's no longer a question, well, what if, what if, what if? It's a fact that we have to look at in our relationships around the world. And one of the positions is in that early recognition, because the U.S. itself has, on its own cognizance, have what's called premature recognition. Being that it was premature recognition, most of the U.S. taxpayers did not understand that there was a fine that was endowed upon that, which was well over $350 million for that premature recognition. Now, it was okay because you taxpayers, as far as in the U.S., you love to bail out GM, you love to bail out AIG, you love to bail out failing corporations. And your voice, because of that, and this gets into a lengthy understanding, but because of that behavior modification, they understand that most people in the U.S. Find comfort in calling into talk shows and griping the situation. And we abide because we agree, and we allow because we have no venue to vent that. All the Republic of Texas, these men right here, and there's multiple others besides us, we're looking at these multiple positions that deal with recognition. Yes, you can build and be independent, and you can have yourself an island and purchase it and put a fence around it, but when you run out of the necessities And it's not an issue because, and in these positions and that recognition, because we look at that import-export and we look at that situation so that we can keep Texans working. We also understand that our biggest export is going to be the resources of Texas, which is our intellect or our understanding, our technology, because we have generations that have lost out. And under that understanding and relationship worldwide, in not only in Texas but the U.S., you're ranked way down there in education. So you're going to have to be competitive, and being competitive means we have to raise the standard, and the only ones that can raise that standard are the people. And that's the issues that we look at, because it's not just a generalized position to where we're going to be a walled-in city and hope to continue. And those are points that are raised. Another one of the issues that I'd like to refer back to on a question earlier was on this issue of Social Security. When we look at these points and positions, we understand that today, being the 21st century, there are other options beside that for your retirement. And even the early arguments of the founders, even dating back to that period of time, with Jefferson and Madison and others, it was brought up on the position is, should one generation be indebted by the previous generation? So how far in debt are you as Texian people to that next generation that we hope there will be a next generation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Bureaucracy has become a fourth branch of the U.S. government. Unelected officials making laws, inflicting penalties of fines and/or jail time. What is the Republic of Texas position? Chaplain Capps.
Dealing with government and what the fact we're facing today, I think it is accurate to call the bureaucracy the fourth branch of government. It's unintended, it's unelected, it's unmanageable, and there's no recourse to stop failure in that. The idea of bureaucracy goes all the way back to the Romans. Diocletian used it. Basically was one of the ones that helped destroy Rome by setting in multiple layers of people to do civil service type jobs. It was really refined in the modern sense by Max Weber. He was a German, lived in Germany in the 1920s and 30s. He was doing a great deal of work publishing. He was a sociologist and was involved with that regime that rose to power in Germany. And Max Weber is looked at as one who basically codified the theory of government by bureaucracy. And this is his definition of what a bureaucracy is. He said, Max Weber said this: bureaucratic administration is fundamentally domination through knowledge. We look at folks all through Texas and even the rest of the United States, we look at the Constitution, we read it. Whether it's the Texas Constitution or the U.S. Constitution, we read it. And then we see what we're having to deal with every day, and we wonder, how did they make that jump? Why do we look at this and it says we have we have a president, we have a Congress, we have a judicial branch? Well, how come I'm being fined by this group here? You have to understand, that's how bureaucracies are set up. They are set up for control. That's what they do. They make, let's just take one that most of you have heard of, the IRS. That is a bureaucracy. Congress made one vote, early 1900s. Congressmen voted once to create this organization. Now, all of those rules that you're having to comply with, those have come from bureaucrats, totally unelected, totally non-responsive. Well, they're not responsible to us, but they're totally non-responsive. Now, this is where people are today, and this is the frustration we feel, there is nothing we can do about this, because very honestly, another 6 or 8 months till November, the U.S. will elect another president. How many of us feel in the back of our minds that it's probably not going to make a bit of difference? Why is that? Because the government is run by a bureaucracy. All right, it is a fourth branch of government. Is it by the people? No. These rules and regulations, I don't know what the position of the Republic of Texas will be. And I say it this way because the people are the Republic of Texas. They're going to have to decide, do they want to live being regulated to death? I got a feeling what that answer is going to be. I got just a real... So, as far as a position on this, I would encourage every Texian to demand the fact that they will not comply to any law, pay any fine that is not voted on and proved by their representative. Yeah, there's going to be laws. There's things we have to do. What was the old phrase they taught us about the Revolutionary War, taxation without representation? Anytime you see a governmental agency, that's what you have. Now, just an aside, and not picking on anybody, I hear it all the time. They're wondering, and it's not really going astray here. I'll bring it back around to it. Because this is why I want to work towards having a free Texas. They say we're just a bunch of old guys. It's just a bunch of old guys up here, and Ray's the youngest one among us. And they say, well, what are y'all trying to do? It's just a bunch of old guys. Well, I tell you what it is. We're doing what old guys do. We're working for the future of our children. We are working for the future of our children and grandchildren. Now, we spoke about timeline earlier. For us up here, that timeline has got to be quick if we're going to enjoy any of the fruits of our labors. But it's those children. It's my kids. It's my grandkids. Just think what my young boys would be able to do if they kick off their education based on their own desire to learn a trade or do something, never have to pay an income tax. What if they spent their entire career not having to pay a tax so that somebody else might or might not take care of them later? Is there anything that the people can do about bureaucracies? Only in the Republic of Texas. There may be things that you don't particularly like about me or anyone else, but if you're going to have a chance, the Republic of Texas is the only lawful means of obtaining our freedoms. And so I don't want to continue to pass down an unruly, quote, government organization. So it doesn't matter who's the right hand or the left hand is going to win the next election. The bureaucracy is still going to be there. It's still going to be going. The only way is for the people of Texas to stand up and say, we the people will not be ruled by somebody. Now, we believe in a republic form of government. Therefore, we elect people that will represent us to facilitate getting things done. I understand that. But if you have all of a sudden you have a new law or a new tax, a new fine, well, think about it this way. Has it increased? In 1862, they passed the Homestead Act that opened up the West of the United States. That was an act of Congress, which made a huge difference in American history. It had 1,300 words to it. The entire act, passed by Congress, 1,300 words. How many acts or laws can be contained within 1,300 400 pages. And that's just the parking fees. I mean, you think it's gone exponential. And here's the thing, I'll leave you with this and I'll pass it on to someone more informed. If there are so many laws that are necessary that your representative cannot know them, there are too many laws. That's what we want. We want our representatives, yes, there's going to have to be laws. And so the position of the Republic of Texas on bureaucracy, I pray in the future that they would choose to have a representative form of government and hold it to that.
Thank you, Chaplain. Secretary of State Billy Ford, do you have any additional comments?
Yes, I think a lot of our bureaucracy problems will solve themselves in the Republic of Texas because one of our strongest forms of government is going to be at the county level. If you want to be involved, get in your county. We do that kind of now in our schools, but we let our schools get away from us because now they're controlled by Washington, and we don't really have the say there. But you, as a resident of your county, you're the one responsible there. You're the one that can go in and have an office. You're the one that sets the taxes for your schools or your roads or whatever else. You want to drive on dirt roads, that's okay. Everybody agree to drive on dirt roads and it's fine. But the bureaucracy, I think, will stop when people in the counties get involved and you understand that that's your money leaving that county, or that's your money that you're having to spend for XYZ. It's not coming from somewhere else, and you're not going to rob the county next to you to get some beneficial program. So county level politics is really, really important for the Republic of Texas. That's where the people get involved, that's where the people have their say, and that's where our sheriffs come to play. That sheriff is elected as a lawkeeper in that county. He's the most powerful man in the country, whether you know it or not, even by laws today. He is the man to see. So in the Republic of Texas, I think a lot of the bureaucracy is going to stop. It'll be taken care of at the county level. I yield.
Thank you, Secretary of State. President Jarnacki.
A couple points that I'd like to add. I remember back in the 40s, my granddaddy, when he was a farmer, and up until in the 40s, farmers and ranchers were exempt from Social Security. When that came about to where they had to start paying Social Security, I remember, just as though it was 20 minutes ago, him saying, "This is the downfall of the United States of America," when everybody has to give something that they'll never get back. He says, us at my age, which back then he was in his 60s, he says, we're going to benefit on your back. And that has certainly come to play, that has taken place. Another point I'd like to make is that the bureaucracy within the U.S. and the state of Texas that we're talking about would never have been taken place if the people themselves had not been apathetic to the point that they allowed it to happen. People have got to hold the people that are creating these laws and these bureaucratic boondoggles, they've got to be made to keep their feet to the fire, and that's it.
Thank you, President Jarnacki. The land of Texas was never ceded to the U.S. So what is the Republic of Texas approach to the U.S. about military bases, national parks, and federal highways? President Jarnacki, do you have an answer to that question?
Yes, I do. They belong forever to the people of Texas, and they will come back to the people of Texas. The U.S., the UN, none of these organizations or countries will have any say-so whatsoever about what goes on in our parks. If these parks, which belong to the people of Texas, I can understand, markers or whatever historically for such things, but it's up to the people of Texas to have them and take them back and use them as they see fit, not as some bureaucratic, yo-yos from Washington, D.C. or New York City within the UN saying you can't do this, you can't do that. No, it belongs to the people of Texas. The military bases that are here are on a lease basis because Texas does own that property. We have heard for years and years that there has to be, between the state of Texas and the U.S. government, some kind of a document that has to be renewed every year or every 2 years. We have heard about it. None of us here have ever seen it. Even Ron Paul was asked about it one time, and he rather skirted the issue on that. When he skirted the issue, it says, yes, there is such a thing. You can tell sometimes a lot more about silence than you can about coming out and saying yes or no. So, I mean, that's certainly the way that I am answered this, and others may have something to add to that.
Thank you, President Jarnacki. We do have a question from the audience. Is the Bureau of Land Management a bureaucracy? And can the sheriff help in this area? Secretary of State Billy Ford, do you have an answer?
The Bureau of Land Management, if you go to the Capitol in Texas, the seal in the middle of that floor says the Republic of Texas. I think one of the reasons we have a land commissioner in Texas is because of the 1836 Constitution that says the lands of Texas will forever belong to the Texian people. That's why they were never ceded. So we have to have someone in that position to administer the land patents or deeds or whatever in Texas. So we actually have a land commissioner appointed in the Republic of Texas. Not active yet, but that's all in the works. That'll all happen. I yield.
Thank you, Secretary of State Billy Ford. Now we will move on about concerns about economics. This is where it hits home for most people. A lot seem to want change as long as nothing changes for them. So what are we looking at? For example, concerning money, currency, what is the monetary basis for exchange in the Republic of Texas? Is it fiat or real? Senator Wilson.
Well, it's very real. Over 6 years ago, the Senate suggested that we begin plans to build a depository for precious metals. The 1836 Constitution and its amended form in 2007 both say the money of this nation will be of gold and silver only. And it was on that basis that we were proceeding, and so we proceeded to set up a system of gold and copper and silver coins for two main purposes. One is that we would have our own currency. It would obey the Constitution, but more importantly, it was not based on the good faith and credit of the Texas government. It's based on the value of the metal. It is intrinsic to the coin. The money is in the metal. If you have the metal is in your pocket, then you have wealth. We also made them commemorative of the significant events in the founding of the Republic of Texas. So the silver Alamo, the 1 ounce, and the half-ounce silver is probably the 1 ounce copper is the San Jacinto battle and the Treaty of Alaska, by which the nation was founded. But it goes further than that. The Depository Committee lately has been working on who wants to carry a lot of gold in your pocket or your purse? I mean, really. But now with technology, with blockchain security, which is an amazing feat, amazing accomplishment, you can have gold in a heavily guarded vault somewhere and draw against that with electronic means, maybe a card that's swiped or whatever. The next thing is, of course, your smartphone. You put it up there, and your smartphone and that merchant's collection device talk to each other, and it's okay, so, $90 has just left my gold fund and has gone into his, whatever he has. His might be Bitcoin. It really doesn't matter as long as it's based on real wealth. Well, friends, there's not a dollar bill or a $20 bill or a $50 bill that's based on real wealth any longer. It's based on con game confidence only. They have conned the people into accepting these 1 penny pieces of paper as $50. But that's just, again, an illusion. So whatever we use, and we would have to probably do some work on the Constitution to go beyond gold and silver. But derivatives of gold and silver, such as drawing against it as a credit, certainly we can get that done. And that's what we will do, so that wealth stays in the possession of those who earned it.
Thank you, Senator. We do have a question from the audience. How would you prevent the IMF and Federal Reserve from undermining and attempting to corrupt or overthrow the new republic? Would there be enough funding to form a loyal military following? Senator Wilson, would you like to?
Read the last phrase, a world military following?
From a loyal military following.
Oh. Well, of course, we don't want it to come to that, do we? But what the question did not reflect on, so I will, is this. Once we are a sovereign nation, the IMF becomes powerless. They can only come into nations where they're welcome, and they're sure not welcome here. Iceland basically took them into custody, the IMF officials, and said, you have half a day to get the next flight out of Iceland or you won't leave here alive. And they fled. That's the answer to the question right there.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary of State Billy Ford, do you have something to add?
Yes. That's assuming that everybody has to deal with Federal Reserve notes. And there are already currencies in the world market today that don't rely on Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve notes were used to buy oil, and thereby establishing its place as a world currency. But the Chinese have done an end around that, and the Russians have done it too. Because of Crimea, Mr. Obama said, you can't do some of those things, and Russia says, well, okay, if you're going to get those sanctions against us, we just won't have any choice but to deal with China and their currency. So now there are countries in the world that are dealing in other currencies besides the Federal Reserve note. There's no one here in this room that can go to a bank today and lay a dollar bill on the counter and say, I want a silver dollar for that dollar, because those are not redeemable notes. Those Federal Reserve notes are absolutely worthless. If we have a currency that's asset-backed, it would be backed in gold and silver. If we make that transaction that Mr. Wilson is talking about, where you have an account and you're drawing against your gold in an account, and the fellow that you're making the payment to decides he wants the gold rather than that transaction, all he has to do is go to that depository and say, okay, Mr. Wilson, bought 2 cows from me, and he paid me, and I want my gold, and they will give you your gold. The Lakota Indian Nation has already set up a depository. And we've already looked into that for the Republic of Texas, and I think that can be done. There are other people that are doing it too, and it's a very good business model. We have people all over the world that are jumping up and down to do business with Texas because we have oil and gas and other intellectual properties and assets here that they want to do business with us. And we will, guess what? We probably won't take services or sell our oil or our gas for Federal Reserve notes. Nobody can make you do that. So that's one of those liberty things. I can't make you take my money. Right now, I can make you take it because that's the only bill of exchange. Unless you happen to be a Texian and you've got some silver and gold and you want to pay me with that, well, we'll still have a deal. That's an alternative. So there are ways around that. International Money Fund or Monetary Fund or the Federal Reserve, they're going to have a hard time in Texas. It's not going to be pleasant for them. They'll have to find somebody else to deal with. I yield.
Thank you, Secretary of State Billy Ford. Senator Wilson, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I believe in giving credit where credit is due. The state of Texas, starting with the governor, sent a letter to the Federal Reserve and said, we're taking our gold back that's been stored at your facility. You have so much time to get it here. And I think that the construction of that heavily guarded facility is underway as we speak. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not the only Texans who believe in these things. I believe that the governor, the people he works most closely with, understand that unless it's in your hand, you don't really own it. And gold or gold-plated tungsten sitting in a vault in the Federal Reserve is not really yours. So they're taking it back. So I give them credit for that. It shows the Texas spirit.
Thank you, Senator. Question is, how will contracts be administered and enforced? Secretary of State Billy Ford, do you have an answer?
Contracts are kind of like any contract. You have to have 2 consenting parties. You have to have a date, a consideration, and a time of the contract. There are certain obligations that go with that. Everybody is interested in common law. I'm gonna get in Mr. Cannon's place here for just a minute because he's so adamantly taught us over the years that there is a place for common law, and we have to have that. But there's also a place for admiralty law or equity law. And how would a county or how would a nation have remedy against another nation if you didn't have some sort of mechanism to deal with that? So that's a contract too. I'm going to leave that to Mr. Cannon to explain it to you, but all that said is this: we can have contracts. Those contracts then become obligations between the 2 parties. If one party breaks their obligations or the time limit on the contract runs out, then the contract expires, then it goes away. But if it doesn't, then we have a place for remedy. That's what the Texian people have been missing all along, is remedy. We have no remedy in the Republic of Texas where the United States is concerned because we have nobody to go to. That's kind of like asking the fox, or a hen asking the fox about supper tonight. What are you going to have for supper tonight? Well, we're going to have chicken. Well, I don't like that deal. Well, that's too bad. We're the fox. We're guarding a chicken house, and that's what we're going to have. So and it's the way it is with the Republic of Texas in the United States. We have no remedy because it violates one of the maxims of law that says a judge can't sit on his own case. And so they have an interest in that case, so they can't sit on it. So we have to have somebody else to do that. That's why we need this international venue. That's why we need equity law, and that's why we need admiralty law to be able to administer those contracts that we can have. Now, any of us can make a contract. I'm a retired plumbing contractor, and you can hire me to come do some plumbing for you, and I'll do the best job I can do. And when it gets done, if you don't pay me, then I can take it to court. I can say, here's what I performed. We agree to pay this. You sign the document, go to jail. Or if I do a poor job and you have evidence of a poor job, we take it to court, and the judge says, okay, Mr. Ford, you didn't do a good job. You've got to go back and redo that job and satisfy this customer. That's part of what contracts are. And that's between you and me. That's between living souls. But there's a place where that won't work. And that's why we need different courts for handling different contracts. And I yield, Mrs. Capps. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Another concern that arises are concerns about law. Civil rights lawyer Harvey Silvergate has written a book called 3 Felonies a Day, showing that the U.S. criminal code has become oppressive. My question is this: what is the difference between the U.S. law code and common law of the Republic of Texas? Chief Justice Cannon.
To go into understanding law, first of all, you have to go back to a position where basically law began. And it's a difficult one, as we say, as far as education and understanding these positions, because law is a science. Being that it's a science, you have to sit and equivalently put a hypothesis, theory, and such together. The difference being is within that Constitution. Our Constitution limits, it restricts, it binds government. Now we know that under our Constitution, as we should have, is 3 branches of government. And those branches of government should always remain separate. The issue today is when we see as far as the federal rules and dealing with common law has its position. And it does have a position, and it's well thought, it's well applied. But without the understanding of the full capacity of common law, you'll find its shortfalls. That's the reason over the periods of time when we look at the Supreme Courts, and especially the Supreme Court of the U.S. from the beginning and its transition, you understand why Chief Justice Story said that he preferred civil law. You may have Chief Justice Marshall who preferred a certain venue. But my preference is equity, and I don't have time to go into all these issues. But what I want to do is, when you have to understand, because everyone's concern is over this, what we have to find is the fault, or when and how it got broken. And that's a very difficult point, except when you do and you educate yourself and you look beyond what the norm is as far as that may be required in receiving a BA or PhD in a regular university. What you find, or what I have found, is that there's an issue that began as what hasn't been exposed and brought up to now, is the issue of what's considered state of exceptions. Now, there's multiple writers on that position as far as states of exceptions. Under states of exception, we understand what emergency war power does. And it's accepted around the world, and an understanding, because as the chaplain referred to earlier, you go back to the Roman time, you go back to other periods of time. What happens under this state of exception? That Constitution becomes suspended. When that Constitution becomes suspended, where does the authority or the enforcement then fall upon? What branch of government does it then turn to? And in that, you'll understand that what it does is it falls to the executive. And as was brought up about these issues of bureaucracy, you understand the administrative. You understand that under that state of exceptions, because we've even posted upon our website an issue of dealing with those emergency war powers that were basically, some understand, as far as back in 1933 with Roosevelt. Under the state of exceptions, what you have, and what's termed, and some may be offended by it, is what you have is what's called a constitutional dictator. Now, that's hard to grasp, but being that he's a constitutional dictator is because what he does is under that Constitution, because it enumerated that authority to that one branch under the state of exceptions or war power. And it's understood because it's been debated from centuries back. If you have a chaotic situation, in other words, it's just total chaos, rather than going through the congressional system of resolving this, because there are different opinions, different attitudes, different ideologies, difference this, difference that, debate. What you have then is that authority as what created basically Caesar or the Führer or these other examples that fall through, is that they claim that Constitution clause of the emergency powers. Thereby, under that constitutional power, this administration now creates law itself. And I don't know, because rather than going into an extended time, that's the reason I hope that this forum extends beyond this into another sitting so that we can get this across to the people. But basically what you have is, under that, you no longer have three branches of government because of that suspension. And that suspension has been going on since 1933. Now, they'll come up and they'll tell you that they removed the war powers or they moved the state of exception. But let me answer with another question. What happened after the trade towers went down? Everyone sits and looks at the issue of those World Trade Center collapsing and the explosion in the planes and the conspiracies and this implosions and all these everything, but you did not focus on what came out of it. What came out of it was legislation that stripped more of your God-given rights, your inalienable rights, that these people that were in position were supposed to be guardians of. And rather than being a guardian of your rights, they became enforcers of policy, because that's what it is. It falls under that executive branch, which then he creates policy that he thinks ensures and continues the running of the country. That's the reason you today have what we look at, and other authors besides me will look at and tell you that you have a militarization of the police force. Why do you have a militarization of a police force? Because of the external threat. But if that external threat is there, that we even in our own historical understanding have seen those threats and degradations all the way back to the beginning, and the people of Texas handled it much better on that area without removing or attaching or suspending your rights, which were guaranteed and declared as, and we understand and we believe, as to guarantee that, not just for ourselves, but for our children, because most of you, as without research and study, do not understand what's called the court called FISA, F-I-S-A. It's a secret court. Being that there's one secret court, which is no secret anymore, are there other courts considered on the same level playing ground as FISA? That's what you need to find out. Because in the suspension, that's the one guarantee that we love and we believe in and that we are adamant about. The rights of the people. And that protection, that guardianship. And that there's no reason in the world, because even when we look at the international realm, and there's multiple human rights that have been quoted and issued and stuff like that, and we look at that and we know that there are certain human rights that cannot be abrogated even under the state of exception or under state of war or under states of this and that. But we also understand that there's a difficulty in understanding, because we've looked at those conventions, which are treaties, and even under the Convention of CERD, C-E-R-D, the Convention on the Elimination of All Racial Discrimination. And we look at it because our high school behavioral modification tells us that his skin's darkening because that's racial discrimination. Well, I'm here to let you know those definitions are much broader. And that's the effects that we in the Republic of Texas have felt under this position, because even those states that are within that union were obligated, because the U.S. signed on to that treaty convention long time back. Yet, when those of the human rights position have called in and asked the governors how they're enforcing such a convention, they say, we don't know nothing about it. Now, that obligation was there, and it's not just an issue of color, race, such and so. It could be nationality. It could be this, could be that. And that's the understanding that we have, because when you, and I try to curb my terms so not to expose too much at one time, because we need to extend this so that you can have a better understanding rather than just grasping pieces and pieces and then running with it and thinking that you have the answer. No, it's a lot more complex. But we, the Republic of Texas, are a people. We are a people. And when that obligation by the U.S. is infringed upon us, where do we go? Do we go to the state level? Do we go to the Supreme Court? Do we go to appellate court? Do we go to circuit court? Where do we go to? Where we go is those international tribunals that have been established, and those obligations are there upon the U.S. and in the upper echelon. They know. That's the reason when you understand this and understand these principles that all tie together, then it gives you the greater, because if this man, if his hair's falling out, do I say it's because of this? No, you have to analyze that. And as a good doctor, and as science is within law and that common law and all these other positions that we speak of as far as admiralty and equity, in equity both parties come in with clean hands. We understand that. And we also understand that if we're to operate as a nation, a representative of people, then we have to understand all those aspects that tie it in together, and we analyze it and we look at it and we say that since you raided the Republic of Texas on Valentine's Day, is that a violation? Well, some may say, well, that's an infringement of this and that and so forth. But to go into that, where do we go? Who are we? Who did the Milbanks tribe go to? Who did the Shoshone go to? Who did the Filipinos go to? Who did the Hawaiians go to? Who are that? But why are they going there? For heaven's sakes, why are you going there? Because the world has changed. I didn't change it. But I also know that in this, when you become fearful of something that you don't know, you need to find out what it is so you ain't scared of the dark. And I understand that is position as far as that international law points go. People, the UN, international law. I'm scared to death. But that's not the point. The point is that you're an educated people and you're a proud people, and you understand that they should have never taught you to read.
Right.
By doing so, it expands, and we leave that to our children and our children's children, an inheritance that was left to us by the covenant that ran with the land known as Texas. So don't be confused when you say common law, you say federal rules, you say this, you say that. It's become chaos. And understanding today, the prominent publicists and jurists today will explain to you what a failed state is. Being that we have awoken. We're awake. We don't have all the answers. We don't have all the energy. We don't have all the qualifications. That's the reason we appeal to you through this system, because you're the people. People, when I talk to them, and I've been through them in past, as far as even out on the road or stop at the store and have a cup of coffee, they wish somebody would do something. I wish somebody would do something. They don't do anything. They just wish somebody would. We're here to tell you, people of Texas, we're trying to do something for you, for your future. Help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Moving on about concerns about education. In the Republic of Texas, who decides the content, method, scope, sequence, and measurements of achievement in the education of all of our children? Senator Wilson.
The parents decide. But to elaborate on that, it's up to the parents to decide in any neighborhood or village or farming community or whatever, how they want to do that. Do they want to do it in their own house, homeschooling, or would they rather find somebody who was in the community but had some experience or some track record and still have it maybe done in a home or a very small place? It's up to them. But for that to happen, national government of the Republic of Texas cannot stop them or hinder them or regulate them. County government cannot hinder them or, the smooth word is regulate them. No, nobody can. And there's a thing of ownership here. Until the age of adulthood, which is generally regarded as 18, parents basically own their children, but not in the U.S., not at all. No, because there, the federal government claims the right to decide whether you're doing a good job, and if they don't think so, then they have the right to take those children out of that awful home and put them in a foster home. Well, the media now is rife with abuses that happen in the foster homes. So that was no solution. That just made it worse. So until God changes his mind, which he doesn't do, it will be the parents who decide, and they decide whether they want it to be a class of 3 or a class of 300. It's up to the parents. Now, can they call on an expert and pay this consultant to give them ideas? Sure, yeah, fine. Can they write a private contract between those 30 families and some expert provider who learned the hard way? Sure, they can do that. Here's the whole answer to the question. Private enterprise can do everything any government ever did, but better and faster and cheaper, and that ends the argument.
Thank you, Senator. All right, gentlemen, describe the characteristics of people who would thrive in an independent Texas republic. Chaplain Capps.
Kind of folks that will be able to thrive in an independent public. It's hard to imagine. We don't have any role models. We don't know of anybody who lives in an independent. You see what I'm saying? So we have to look at history. Have to look at something deeper than that. We see in our history the kind of people who came to Texas in the first place. They came here and they thrived. They were invited here actually by the previous government, Mexican government, because they were tough enough to take care of the land. So they came into a very difficult situation. If they were man enough, they were woman enough, they could live here. And so what kind of people would thrive I think it goes back beyond all the specifics. And I know this is getting into new territory that might seem strange to say, but it's how the founding of the country came about, and we're coming up within 4 years to the 400th anniversary of the landing of the Pilgrims. And the first Pilgrims landing here. The kind of people that will thrive will have many characteristics that I hope some of these other men draw out. But let me draw out this. The kind of people that can survive in liberty, the only ones that can make good use of liberty, are a Christian, moral people. That statement did not seem strange back when Americans had their liberty. The fact that that statement seems strange today is proof of itself. Why do we have this? Only a morally upright people can live under common law. Only morally and internally regulated people can live without regulation. My wife and I went this summer, and we went to Pilgrim, the place, Plymouth, where they landed at Plymouth Rock. Off of the beaten path, in behind the neighborhood, unknown, is the largest granite statue in the United States. Some of you know what I'm talking about. It's a monument to the forefathers, 81 feet tall, solid granite. 36 feet at the top is a beautiful lady named Faith. You know her name is Faith because it's carved in stone. She has an open Bible under her left arm. You can tell it's open. You can walk around the statue and you see the Bible laid open. Her right hand pointed to the heavens and a star of wisdom on her head. Amazing. But she's just the pinnacle. She's just In 1820, Congress of the United States paid for this structure to be built to remind people how to rebuild your country after it's gone. And it's a blueprint. Faith is just the top 36 feet. The next level down has 4 statues. The first statue to your right is this beautiful lady, does not have any pupils, just blank eyes because she's gazing inward. She's seated. Her name is Morality. You know it's morality because it's carved in stone. Her name is Morality. She's seated on a pedestal that represents 2 characters that contribute to morality. On one side is the relief of the prophet. You know he's the prophet because it's carved in stone. Prophet. The other fella is the evangelist. You know his name is Evangelist because it's carved in stone. Evangelist. So I am not a crazy Baptist preacher to say our country, the Republic of Texas, if it shall ever stand again, can only stand in the hearts of a moral people. There is, and here I know it's, you don't normally hear this, a difference of religious belief causes different actions. If you believe something different to someone else, you will act differently than that other person. On the other side, on around the statue, you have law. This is a very stern-looking gentleman seated on his pedestal holding a copy of a odd-looking document. It has 2 shaped like the 10 Commandments or something. But you know his name is Law because it's printed in there, Law. On one side of his pedestal, you have a picture of Justice. You know it's Justice because his name is printed right there. On the other side, you have a representation of Mercy. Mercy's name is printed right there. On around the relief, you have come to the third figure. Her name is Education. Beautiful young lady there, looking out into the future, holding the scroll. On one side, you have Youth. You know it's Youth because it's a picture of a young lady holding a child's hand. And on the other side of Education, her pedestal, you have Wisdom. It's an older man, and you see the flowing beard, and there's 2 articles next to Wisdom. One is an open Bible, and the other is a picture of the globe. Under the Word of God, you know how the world should work. That's wisdom. The 4th statue in the second phase is Liberty. And he doesn't need any assistance at the gym. This guy can take care of himself. Liberty is seated there. He has the sword across his lap. He has the broken shackles around his ankles. Has a animal skin draped across his shoulders, and he's looking out, protecting what he's earned and gained. There's two things on the pedestal that he's seated on. There is a picture there, and if you look it up, you'll see pictures of it, but it was only in person that we saw what it was. And it's the fact, tyranny overthrown. Tyranny overthrown. And in that relief, you see Liberty Man. I call him Liberty Man. He's standing there and his sword's held high and his foot is upon the chest of a person. And it's only in person that Catherine and I saw it. On that one that was on the ground was wearing a crown. And on the other side of his relief, his pedestal, there was peace. There was peace. People try to build their lives. They want liberty. They want to look like Liberty Man. They want to act like Liberty Man. But they don't build the foundations. Unless you're a good man, you shall never be a free man. I truly apologize for taking so much time, gentlemen. I've learned,
Amen. Keep it up.
Learned so much from you. But my contribution would say the kind of people that would thrive in the Republic of Texas will be Christian, moral people.
Thank you, Chaplain. One last question, and it's from our audience. If I want to get involved in your group, for example, for government, who should I contact to find out what positions are open and what qualifications are necessary? Secretary of State Billy Ford, would you please answer that question?
Yes, I will. If you are interested in becoming a Texian, we have to go all the way back to the 1836 Constitution. You have to be of lawful age, and you have to appear before a competent authority and declare your allegiance to the Republic of Texas. Now, that sounds trite, but it's not. The other thing is you have to live here 6 months. Believe it or not, I've had people call me from New Jersey, New Hampshire, California, all over the world. There's a guy that lives in California. He's a Russian. He's called me. He wants to know how he can be a Texian. You have to live here. You have to live on the land. So you have to be here. You have to be here 6 months to be able to do that. We have a form on our website that's it's a declaration of affidavit of declaration. You can fill that form out. It takes 2 witnesses. I need your right thumbprint where it says my seal. And those 2 witnesses will verify your signature. You send that to me, and you become a Texian. And it's on your word that all those facts on there are true. I have to warn you, the same way you come in, you can go out. If you fail the Republic of Texas, you may have your citizenship revoked. So you need to be careful. I'm not asking you to be perfect, but there are grounds for that. I can show you. I've got some in my folder, in my file, in my office, of those that have had their citizenship revoked. There are grounds for that, and so, but you don't want to go there. But if you want to be a Texian, if you want to stand up and come to your place in Texas and say, I want to be a part of that, then that's how you do it. Then you can look on our website. There's positions that are available. There's all those slots have to be filled. I wish somebody would stand up and take over a lot of places. And what we're actually looking for, the reason for this forum, the reason for all of us being in front of you today is to educate you to what can be done and what's yours for the taking. All you have to do is stand up and take it. I've used this analogy before. I was in church and the preacher was preaching a sermon a long time ago about an evangelist that came, and he said, any of you kids that want to come up here and get a silver dollar, come up here and I'll give you a silver dollar. And that was in the days when I was very young, and some of those older kids were, I didn't go to church then, but some of those older kids had got to the place where they were bashful, or they wouldn't get out in front of people like that. That silver dollar was theirs. All they had to do was come and take it. Some came, some didn't. He didn't force it on them, but it was there if they wanted it. And I liken that the same way he did in his message. It's about salvation. Be my prayer that everybody be saved. I can't make you saved. I can't get you saved. All I can do is tell you about the one that can. And I just happen to be a Baptist. That's the reason I can rag on Baptist preachers and Baptist faith. But I agree with what Chaplain Cap said about somebody that will thrive in the Republic of Texas, being a morally good person. We're not going to do business with thieves and crooks. You don't have to. There's somebody across the street that you can do business with. So I'd ask you to examine yourself if you fit that qualification. If you think you can, you don't have to be perfect, but if you've got a good moral quality, a good moral character, and you want to stand up and take something that belongs to you, it's there. It's yours. All you have to do is claim it. Step forward, become a Texian, help us get our nation reestablished and back where it's supposed to be. I yield.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Now, I would like to thank everyone for attending today and hope to see you again at future forums. Thank you and God bless.
Amen.